One. Hey everyone, if you love combat sports such as Kyokushin Karate, kickboxing, MMA, other sports, make sure to hit the like, share, subscribe, comments button and the Drew Sperian Show, the show that's 80% combat sports, 20% everything else. We are on all platforms. Today, my guest, I'm going to start doing my Bruce Buffer or like the Michael Buffer. I mean, I can't copyright them. Weighing in at 170 pounds. He's a former lightweight. He's a former middleweight. He fights out of Australia, down under, representing Shihan Cameron Quinn's dojo. He is known as the Punisher. He's the one, the only Ben Ajamian. Welcome to the Drew Sperian, Sensei Ben.
Oh, Ben's fine, Drew. Ben's fine, but thank you for having me. It feels weird when people call me Sensei outside of karate dojo. Feel good.
Pumped, man. It's been a long time. I remember when we connected for the first time, and like, you know, it's like that Middle Eastern connection because, you know, you're Armenian, I'm Iranian. You know, I'm very proud of of my roots from Central Asia. So
yeah, and so you should be. You know, we got a very rich cultural history there. Dates back longer than most people's.
Oh, it's totally. I mean, my dad is. I tell people my dad is because when people ask me, well, you don't look Iranian. I said, and I need to put a photo of my dad up. And I say, listen, does this look Iranian to you? Look, I'm white like my mother because my mom is Canadian, but her roots stem from Belarus and Russia. But my dad was born in Iran. But yeah, Iran is like, it's like we're bred. We're like Armenians, Georgians, and Iranians are bred for combat sports. I'm very proud of that.
Hell yeah. I love watching between the wrestling in the Olympics, between past MMA like legends, and you can say even up to weightlifting in the Olympics. You know, those are Armenians, Central Asians. We're just bred different. We are just bred very, very different. And I think I want to say it comes from where we come from, constantly having to deal with each other in that very small space, as well as dealing with like outsiders. But yeah, who knows? It's just bred into us in a different sort of way.
Yeah, it's so Ben, you know, obviously I always like to begin the conversation off. Who has Ben before becoming a sensei, and how did you discover martial arts, settling on Kyokushin?
Yeah, so Ben before becoming a sensei was only 8 years old. So I was 8 years old. I was a very hyperactive kind of kid. So he couldn't give me anything colored red. For some reason, it just triggered stuff. Too much sugar, I guess, whatever they want to say. But no, basically I was right into combat sports because my dad's ex-military here in Australia, but he was real big on soccer. But at the same time, in his Armenian genetics, somehow he loved wrestling. So I was constantly, you know, watching, you know, wrestling on VHSs that he had or whatever the case might be. So Ninja Turtles is still like 100% my biggest influence, and superheroes. So got a knock on the door one day. A guy was opening up a karate school local to my area. Hey, you know, ma'am, speaking of my mom and dad, opening up a karate school. Would you be interested in joining in, or your son perhaps? I'm like, please. And that's pretty much where it started. It was actually initially a Shotokan Goju base. So it was a lot of Okinawan styles there. And I wasn't one of those kids that got a chance to train in a kids class. There was no kids class. It was a beginners and an advanced class. So I was there, and I was one of, I think, only 2 or 3 other kids under the age of 16, 17 training there. So I was around adults. So, and I wasn't one of those kids as well that was kind of like just there to dick around. I was like, oh, you know, when it's Moxor, like really, like I'm going to be the next Raphael. You know, that's exactly how I was picturing it. And then obviously through that, I got exposed to all sorts of martial arts. You know, action stars. Bruce Lee obviously was a big one. I used to nickname myself the Little Dragon when I was a kid because I was just obsessed with Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan. You know, we all know the Hong Kong action stars, followed by the obvious Van Dams and
Dolph Lundgren.
Yeah, heck yeah, man. If you are a kid or a person that trained in the early 90s and you're an 80s born person or whatever, and you don't have some form of influence from any of those people, you've been underexposed. to martial arts. You've been coddled. You've been coddled. I remember teaching kids, and I'd be like, "Do any of you know who Bruce Lee is?" And one of them's like, "Oh, is he the one that?" Oh, you know. And I'm like, "Yeah, that's him. That is him." You know. So ultimately, my instructor had retired from training for work reasons, whatever. And I was like, I'm not going to train unless I'm training under him. And I used to compete in a tournament circuit here in Australia called National All Styles. And it was basically, you guys have ISCA.
Yeah, North America. Yeah, for kickboxing. Yeah, that's yeah.
Because they also have a tournament circuit here, but it's for all martial arts. You know, you got the point sparring, your kata, all that sort of stuff. And so I used to compete in that. And then there was a karate group there that used to train there, that used to compete there. I would always come like third or fourth to them in my age division. I'm like, oh, I want to be like them because they're the best, right? So I want to go on a train with them. So ended up going to that karate dojo there. It's on the Gold Coast here in Australia, in Queensland. It just happens to, as years went on, I learned that that was the essential birthplace of Kyokushin here in Queensland. That karate school particularly, that dojo. And so that's when I got exposed to Kyokushin in a roundabout way, because the teacher was a Kyokushin practitioner from back in the day. He actually used to train with Shihan Cameron when they all started first training in Kyokushin. So they were all kids still, essentially. He was also the, at one time, the branch chief of Australian Sado Kaikan. So he used to go to Japan. He refereed. You can actually see him online in the Andy Hoog and Kakuda fight. So he refereed a couple of Sadokan matches back over there in Japan and stuff like that. So I had that exposure. And then I think I would have been probably like 15 when I was like, I'm hungry for a little bit more. You know, I'm competing in these tournaments. They're non-contact tournaments, they're semi-contact tournaments. You know, I'm world junior champion, national champion, whatever. But I was kind of craving more, like something was missing. So I said, I'm going to either go and join Aikido, Judo, and learn grappling. And it just so happened that I did a bit of that, like in the interim, like a little bit, a couple of months at a time, just exploring different dojos and whatnot. And on my mother's side, which is a very heavily French Lebanese side, all of my old great uncles and all that, they're like, you should do judo, you know, it's like, because they're French, obviously. And I have an uncle who, he lived in Okinawa for a long time, and he went back to France. He's a giant of a man, and he actually only just recently passed away. It's pretty sad now that I remember, but he actually was teaching the French Special Police Force, hand-to-hand combat and stuff like that and whatnot. So I would always talk back and forth to him, and he'd send me these cool black and white VHSs of him training and, you know, instructional videos and stuff. So there was that heavy influence there, but I don't know why, I just was drawn to Kyokushin no matter what. Like, it was just there. And my dad had gone and seen a dojo, said, yeah, it was kind of like where we used to train anyway. So, you know, it's not a big change, but I've bumped into a friend just by coincidence that has their kids at this other dojo. And he said, come down and have a look. So I went down and I'm looking inside, I'm seeing all these photos and stuff and whatnot. And the name Cameron Quinn popped up. And I'm like, why does that name sound so familiar to me? I'm thinking, I don't know. But anyway, I walked in. He only had his Uchideshi and a couple of Japanese guys training there on that night. So they said, come back the following training session and he should be around. And that's pretty much where it kicked off. It just stuck as soon as I met him, and, you know, trained the first few times, had a real interesting couple of experiences in the first few training sessions, of course. And then just seeing him, I guess, do the whole session, do sparring, and then go and put on this weird grappling gi and start doing jiu-jitsu after just doing 3 hours of teaching. That kind of just was what triggered with me. And I was like, I'm sticking around because this guy's got a lot to teach and I got a lot to learn. And that's kind of where it's progressed, and the history is there, and I haven't left since.
That's amazing. So also like, you know, as you said, like that era too, because like what year were you born in? Like, are you a 90s kid or are you
87.
a, oh, 87? Okay.
Yeah.
It's funny. So I'm a 91er.
Yeah.
During the period that we were like growing up, so back in my day, my dad had the direct TV, and when it was illegal in Canada, there's ways of doing it. And so we used to have the action channel because I wanted to watch the R-rated anime because like I used to love I still kind of love anime. It's just as you grow older, you kind of like grow out of it. But back then I wanted to watch like the Akiras and all the other stuff. And I came
Yes.
across Double Impact. So that was my first exposure. Yeah, and Blade 1 and Rocky 4. Those were the three films. And it was around 2002 to 2003-ish, around that period. And also then I played Tekken 4. And Tekken 4, Jin goes from learning the Mishima story, like crazy how I remember all these facts, but I can't remember how to do taxes. Anyways, so Jin Kazama was learning Mishima karate at the time, but in Tekken 4, he goes to Australia to learn Kyokushin.
Yeah, specifically say Brisbane, which is Cameron's old dojo, Shihan Cameron's old dojo.
I think they had an interest. I think Namco had an influence with Shihan Cameron. I'm starting a conspiracy theory here, Shihan Cameron. So I'm really sorry. I'm trying to get it, but if it puts eyes on your dojo, you get a free ad read out of it. So I'm thinking maybe Namco kind of knew Shihan Cameron. And they said, you know what? Why don't we just make Jin's story associated with Brisbane? So
it could have been because Gary was actually featured in a Kyokushin video game made for PS1 back in the day.
That's true. I remember that game. Yeah, I've seen it on YouTube since I got into karate.
Yeah, it's horrible. It's horrible to play in comparisons to today, but it's very cool. It's very cool that, you know, he was that good that he was given props in a way that, you know what, we'll even turn around and say people go to that dojo, and because that's what happened for real. People come all the way from Japan and around the world to specifically train at that dojo because of the way that the guys were so good at representing the dojo at tournaments.
Yeah, you guys too have like a really interesting, and Australia too is like a hotbed. Like Canada we have our legends, and there's Brazil and there's Japan, but Australia's got like Gary O'Neill, Shihan Cameron, Shihan Judd Reed, Wally Schnaubert. Well, he's in Papua New Guinea, but Sam Greco, yeah.
We got to not just even in Kyokushin, like you can even look at like go outside of Kyokushin and look at some of the top kickboxers. I mean, Wayne Park, bang, just straight up. Everyone knows
Stan Long, Stan the man.
You know, those sorts of people. It's just you got famous actors like Richard Norton, who was like an ex-Zendokai guy, but he was in a lot of Jackie Chan movies.
He was in Mr. Nice Guy.
He was. I actually trained. I did a seminar with Richard Norton, and the cool thing about being Shihan's student / head instructor, if you will, was when I was at this seminar, he introduced me at the beginning. We hit it off really well, and it turned out that I was his fall guy for the rest of that 2.5 hour seminar. And I can tell you, it's not all acting. It is definitely not all acting. The guy is legit.
Those movies, though, man, like really, like it's like Mohammed's my friend, my close friend, who became my cornerman now, like we're just friends, you know, because like, you know, he does his thing, I do my thing. Mo got into martial arts because of Jackie Chan. Oh, another movie we have to add to that list, Romeo Must Die. Some of those Romeo Must Die.
Jet Li all the way. That was so good. Do you remember watching him in his first actual Hollywood movie, which was Lethal Weapon 4? And he had basically zero English lines because he couldn't speak any English, but he was such a badass in it. And then they were like, well, let's start putting him in his own feature films after seeing all of his Hong Kong Wire Fu movies. And the dude, Jet Li, Fearless is still my favorite.
My favorite one is Romeo Must Die. When it comes to Jackie Chan, obviously Rumble in the Bronx, but also another one that not many people know about unless you really know Jackie Chan films, First Strike, where it's with the Russians in Australia.
Still here in Australia.
Yeah.
Still here in Australia. Yeah. First Strike. I remember when he was here doing it, I remember just being with my dad, and because a lot of it was filmed on the Gold Coast and Sunshine Coast, which is about 100 kilometers north of where I live. And we were just like hanging for every time you'd be out in like a hot spot for tourists here on the Gold Coast. Oh, Dad, do you reckon we could go and see if we could find Jackie Chan? Yeah,
Good
I'm
times,
a big,
man.
big, Hong Kong kung fu movies. I love all of his old films like Meals on Wheels, where he gets to fight Benny Urquidez and all those sorts of movies. It's just they're just great movies. The choreography's on another level.
For its time, this is before the internet and before CGI and all that. This is like actual choreo, like stunt work. Van Damme, when it comes to Van Damme, as I say, Double Impact was my favorite. Lionheart is a, but I only saw Lionheart when I was in high school. That's the thing, like, because I'm gonna get a message after this when this episode's released, the recording, and Mohammed's gonna say, "Shut up with when you got into Kyokushin. You did not like it. That's a lie." He does it to troll me. So, Mo, shut up. I'm telling the truth here with when I got exposed to martial arts, but I only got into Kyokushin to take it finally in 2016. So it took a long time, but I'm doing it 5 years now. So yeah.
Good work. Hey, better late than never, as I say.
Oh yeah, totally. So you're basically you stumble upon the school, which is Shihan Cameron Quinn's, to train Gary O'Neill. And so what was it like when you started going there as a kid? Like, what was your first exposure to the tournaments like under that school?
So I used to train at the time. Shihan was teaching two young gentlemen, Yusuke Fuji, who is now, I believe, I could be wrong, but I think he's the branch chief for Russia, actually, under Kaneko Shihan. He was for Royama for a very, very, very long time, but I believe they've split just recently. They moved away from a few of the, originally under Hiroshige Shihan. They all kind of moved away for a little bit, and then he went over to Russia prior to that and was already branch chief over there, and he's still there. But he was also, at that time, he was like the All Japan schoolboys, champion and all this sort of stuff and whatnot. And I was also really good friends with Hiroshige Shihan's son, who was also here, Atsushi Hiroshige, who was here training. And it just so happened that on my first night of training, so I've never been one to walk into a dojo, fold my arms and be like, I'm the shit. Treat me like that, especially when you're like 15, 16. Some kids can get into that mind space. I've won a national, I've won world championships, this and that, and blah, blah, blah. But the one thing that I always understood was there's always going to be better people out there. And I was always interested in meeting them, learning from them, and competing against them. So when I rocked up to Shihan's dojo, I think it was like the second or third night, I was already a junior knee dan, right? But I'd done gradings with adults. It wasn't like I was doing my gradings with kids. We were doing it with adults at my old karate school. So I did 30 rounds. I did my 40 rounds for Shodan here in Australia, do 40 rounds, all that sort of stuff. So I and I was always competing against much bigger people because when I was like younger, I was as small as I am now for some of my age. So it was a sparring night. So we did a pretty solid session, and Shihan was like, "Oh, we're going to do some sparring." And I feel like if I had not already understood how Japanese culture works in the dojo, I think it would have been more of a shock to me. But I was kind of like, all right, yeah, no, I know what's happening here. So the first person to turn around and say, let's spar, was the enforcer, and that was Yusuke. And he was only a year older than me, I think. And he had already read that I'm not a Kyokushin black belt, right? Because my belt didn't say Kyokushin. But he was like, let's spar. I'm like, okay, no worries. And that was the first real full contact karate Kyokushin experience I'd had. I was seeing the lights of the dojo that many times from just having both my legs kicked out from under me from a low kick. The guy was just insane fast, insane strong. And we even had a little moment where he was just like, oh, like, come on, hit me hard. And I'm hitting him hard. And I'm thinking, well, I can't say don't hit me back. So I said, hit me back. And I kind of learned the hard way. But I got his respect there because I didn't drop. I didn't, lose control or anything like that. And afterwards, he came up to me and he goes, where do you live? And I says, oh, I live in this part of that. It just so happened that he was homestaying a few doors down where I was homestaying. He had a key to the dojo, and he said, you and me, we're going to train. So every Saturday and Sunday, we would get together. We would go to the dojo. We'd ride down our bikes to the dojo, and we would train. And he would just take me through all this stuff. And he really exposed me to the difference between full contact in terms of like punching and hitting someone, and full contact in terms of punching, hitting, and penetrating. And Shihan elaborated that concept a few times with me, and it wasn't really sticking. It was like, I'm like, oh, I'm hitting, but I'm not understanding. But then Yusuke took me through it. So then when it came to tournaments, Yusuke had gone back to Japan at this stage. I was just starting to compete in tournaments at about 16, 17 Colts tournaments, 16, 17-year-olds under 18 tournaments. And after working with him and under Shihan Cameron for at least a 2-year period by this stage, it was like cheese and chalk. I competed in my first tournament in the first, like, I think 8 or 9 months. It was a friendly tournament between New Zealand and Australia. And I watched Yusuke just smash grown men with at least 15 to 20 kilos on him. I watched him knock out a heavyweight kickboxing champion at this karate tournament. And I was thinking to myself, this is insane. And I had competed, and these kids are hitting me, and it's not the same as the way this kid hits me, So that was my early experience. And then it sort of went on to, because here in Australia at the time, there wasn't many Kyokushin tournaments because of the separation, the groups and so on. So they were far and few between. But what there were a lot of these other like ISCA and these other organizations that were holding full contact matches. And me and a couple of my mates that I was training with at the time, we'd go and we'd just clean up shop. And I remember this one tournament we went to, it was, you only had to wear the headgear as a junior, right? And then they saw us working the pads and stuff out the back, and the the director of the organization, the tournament, comes up and he goes, oh, we've just had a few parents come up and ask if you guys could wear shin guards. And we're like, okay, no worries. Then it turned from shin guards to the soft, small mitts, and turned from shin guards to the small mitts to the foot guard as well. And we're just like, all you're doing is giving us further advantage, because it just means that we can, more protection, more or less. So they were the earlier tournaments as well. And, it was hard because, like I said, they're few and far in between, but it was fun at the same time because you were exposed to not just Kyokushin fighters, but like Taekwondo full contact fighters and this karate full contact fighter and, this and that, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, in my younger years, that was my initial exposure to tournaments, if you will.
That's interesting. And what's interesting too, like one thing too, like now to continue with the tournaments as you get older, you're doing the more full contact, but then now, so there's 2 things I want to say, make a statement here. So there's like, when I started like contacting you to come on the show, and you said, Australia is doing like cage, like ring fights for Kyokushin. And also there's another guy that's coming up now that I'm keeping an eye on. His name is Nazar Kasib. He's been on my show too.
Yeah, that's it. Yep.
Nazar's like, bro, like this guy
is a job. Yeah.
He's really good. Like I love his technique, man. Like he's my favorite middleweight prospect right now to keep an eye on.
Yeah, he's a great fighter. I'm pretty sure he hails out of Shihan Judd's dojo. Am I right? I could be wrong.
Nazar, when you watch the episode, please comment to just clarify that. But I know he's trained with Sensei Patrick Pinto. Shout out to Pat Pinto of the Kyokushin Shuffle podcast, by the way, and the Forever the Student ebook. Ad read. It's just how I segue. You love how I segue that.
It's smart. It's all about the plug. It's all about the plug. But yeah, look, there's a lot of, I think the newer age guys are starting to, I think people like myself, Pat, Shihan Judd, and that, we all kind of get that there's been a big gap for at least the last 15 years or so in the ways of opportunities for young fighters to have a fight, and not just have a fight, but have a fight where it's competitive and to really excel and put us on a level where we do get not just exposure, but recognition from overseas, you see. So it's been something that we've all kind of been talking about, looking at, etc. And I've always been of the mindset too, where I don't care if it's a tournament, I don't care who's holding it. If they're okay with me being there, I'm going to go and compete in it. Whether it's this group, an MMA match, kudo, kickball, whatever. If they're okay with me going and competing, and I get to represent and put further exposure onto Kyokushin, then I'll do it. You know what I mean? Because people will turn around and they will ask. They always come around and they go, "What do you do? Where do you come from? Like, what style of karate is that? We didn't know karate could do that." Blah 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 blah. So, being able to have these tournaments now and really trying to highlight the next generation of fighters, especially here in Australia, because we're so far away from everyone else, so far away, and it doesn't help that our country is so big, and it literally has nothing in between, in the middle. It is just East Coast and West Coast and nothing in between. And for us to be able to, you know, organize tournaments and stuff like that, or get into tournaments that are going to be big enough to give us experience points to be able to turn around and say, I feel confident competing at a international level, it's so hard to do. And that's why I think it's really cool to see all of these new tournaments, if you will, coming up, because my generation of competitor is either at the end of their competitive career or is just retired and is looking at it, looking back going, you know what was the one thing that we didn't get that we can give to these guys coming up? And that's way more opportunities to compete.
Yeah, like Nazar was going into kickboxing tournaments using Kyokushin, wearing the shorts. Very smart brand move as well. So yeah, there needs to be that. And also too, like modernizing it on the internet. So Nazar's doing a great job in Russia. We'll get to one of our mutual friends we have in that region. But before we get to him, like in Russia, you look at one Kyokushin, they have of God Hand Dojo in Russia, Sensei Lasha and Sensei Andre. They're putting out all this content of like how to do the techniques. God Hand Dojo is one of the premier dojos in Kyokushin for Russia. Like they got it right. They're doing it right. They know how to get it on the internet. They have tens of thousands of subscribers and like followers. That's what we need to do. We need to follow that blueprint in order to stay modern and relevant.
100%. You gotta, I always say, you adapt, you evolve, or you die. You can't, and I know like a lot of older instructors will probably get the shits with me, and I apologize, but if you can't stick to the old way of doing it anymore, the whole, if you put it online, it's showing off, whatever. It's not anymore. It's a form of advertising. And that's why things like MMA and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Jesus, man, you can't walk down the road and not see a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school on the Gold Coast where I'm from anymore. It used to be, there was back in 2004, even, if you will, to 2010 almost, there was like two Jiu-Jitsu schools, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu schools in like all of the Gold Coast, in all of Queensland almost. And now all of a sudden, it's every suburb it's like a McDonald's. If there's a new suburb, there's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school there. And people are going to that, not because they know anything about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but because they hear it being spoken about nonstop in MMA. UFC, these big promotions, everyone knows if you want to be good at MMA, you have to have a grappling base. Me personally, I think you should have a wrestling base more than a jiu-jitsu base, but I'm not the professional here. Just people like like Habib Nurmagomedov. He's just proven the sole fact that if you have solid wrestling, ridiculous wrestling, it's just as good, if not better, than having good jiu-jitsu. But that's not the point. The point is they hear that, they see that, they go to that. And so for us Kyokushin people who are stuck in this medieval way of trying to promote the schools, it's either going to just completely phase out, especially here in Australia, or something needs to be done to help it kick back up a little bit. So that's where I'm at with it all.
It makes sense, but luckily we have Shihan Judd, Sensei Pat. They're doing their part to keep it like going. Where I'm in Quebec, there's Ikeo Nakamura. They're doing an amazing job to keep Kyokushin alive. Like they're figuring like Dio, our organization's president, is very savvy with online and technology, and my Shihan Pierre is figuring out ways to get online content out there. Like he's it's in the works, and we're trying to figure out ways to really get it out there, because we're looking at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. They did such a good job. If they could do a good job, why can't we? So we have to take from them, as you say, and adapt to it and get out of this. Oh, we're going to pollute Sosai's. No, Sosai even said, you got to raise the bar. He said that in his, like, one of his final interviews. So why aren't we doing it? It's like, it doesn't matter the organization. Just, we got to do a better job.
100%. And it's, if you want to go and talk about what Sosai said, you don't even need to talk about what he said. Just look at what he did. He specifically went around the world exposing the world to Kyokushin in ways that no one at the time could do. I mean, you know, he was nicknamed Godhand for a reason, and people weren't sitting there going, oh, wow, he's got amazing kata technique. We want to join Kyokushin because of his kata technique. They were looking at what he could do as a human being in feats of strength and power that just made people go, if he got that way from doing that, then we want to try that at the very least, you know? And so it just, his abilities attracted more people from around the world to do it. So how you did it back then was you physically flew to those places and you showed what you could do. So the internet has made the world a smaller place, so to speak. So we can do the exact same thing and stop looking at it like a form of showboating or showing. No, it's a form of exposure. It's a form of advertising. It's a way to keep what we do alive. That's why we do it.
Perfect. Yeah, it makes total sense. So where does this idea of the ring fights come in Australia now? Because you've been doing that. And how's the experience been going from, say, fighting in a gym, maybe to a sports complex, to now in an actual ring?
So probably in 2009, I did my first ring karate tournament. And it was for a Muay Thai and MMA promotion. And the promoter invited me along because he was good friends with Shihan Cameron, loved Kyokushin. And he said, you know, where we are, what we do now all starts from these full contact karate tournaments, you know? So I want to show this crowd what it's all about, you know? So I happily said yes. We organized a few really good fighters. And as usual, I was the smallest person. But it was only an exhibition match, right? So we did a tournament. We didn't get paid for it or anything like that. Interestingly enough, the crowd was sort of like divided. You know, you had some people that turned around and said, oh, if I wanted to watch karate fights, I'd go to a karate thing. I came here to watch MMA, blah, blah, blah. And then the following time I did it in a Muay Thai versus Kyokushin fight. Then I did another exhibition match, and it was in a cage for an MMA promotion. Once again, exhibition. So it wasn't professional or anything like that. There was nothing in that sense. Crowd sort of was a lot more warm to it. I think probably because it was two really, really good guys going at it. So the technique was on a different level. So then when I got approached for this one, the promotion is Infliction Fight Series, by the way. You can find it www.inflictionfightseries.com.au. There's your plug. The promoter is a former student of John Wayne Pars. So he's a big Muay Thai practitioner, but he also did Kyokushin when he was a little kid, and he has mad respect for it. And he was like, it's not fair that you guys do what you do and you're not getting exposure for it. You're not getting the props that I feel like you should get for it, etc. And he asked if it just so happened that a friend of mine that I used to train with back in the day said, I got this connection, Ben. he fights overseas. He's done this, he's done that. So I went and watched the first couple of promotions that he had, and then we had a chat about it. And he's basically turned around and he's asked if I'd be happy to fight in this competition, and he would pay. He said, "You will be contracted. You'd sign a contract. You'd fight. You'd get paid. It's not an exhibition match. Like, I want you guys to do it, show, but I want guys that have competed at a level that's going to make this crowd go, holy wow, you know?" So I said, look, I can help with the promotion of it. I can help with finding fighters, etc. The problem's going to be, I'm not going to find anybody my size local, especially because of COVID at the time. Borders were shut, right? I said, I'm not going to find anybody local that's going to be my size, that's going to be of the caliber, if you will, that you are looking for. So I'm going to probably have to find bigger people. And he's like, oh, how big are we talking? And I'm like, maybe like a 15 to 20 kilo weight difference. And he was just like, oh, what? No, you can't do that. You know, these are contracted fights. You know, it's a professional thing, rah, rah, rah. I said, look, Kyokushin all the way up until probably like the mid-90s, all their tournaments were open weight tournaments. There's no lightweight, middleweights, all that sort of stuff. When it came to world level, your world tournaments were all open weight. It was only up until I think the late 90s where they introduced at world level and all Japan level weight classes, world weight tournaments. Your country, you'd have lightweights, middleweights, heavyweights, and the best of those 3 or 4 divisions would go and create the national team. Then you'd go overseas, but you'd go to Japan for worlds, but you'd still compete in an open weight tournament. And he's like, oh, wow. And I'm like, yeah. So essentially, someone my size could end up drawing someone in the first or even second round that's literally 30 to 40 kilos heavier than me, and I can't say no. And he's like, okay, well, if you're okay with that, then let's do it. And so that's exactly what happened. We ended up getting guys that were very experienced guys that had competed overseas before and nationally and whatnot. And we put on a show, and it just so happened that the guy that they picked to not win, which was little old me, ended up winning the 4-man tournament and getting paid good dollars to do it. And apparently the crowd absolutely loved it because it was something totally different to what they'd seen before. And now it's an ongoing thing, and the promotions signed me to fight another 2 times this year.
Interesting. So we have a mutual friend now that I want to bring it back to, because we've been talking about him on nonstop, and I've been sharing his posts from your neck of the woods, from heritage wise. Sensei Artur Arushian, one of the probably among the greatest lightweights.
Without a doubt, in terms, I mean, how many? What is he like? Oh God, 7 or 9 time European KWU champion, and you know, I think he's like 5 times or 4 times their world champion and stuff like that. So it was, he's an absolute legend, and a gentleman, absolute gentleman. I think the funniest part for me was when I competed against him in 2016 at the Kyokushin World Championships. I didn't actually know who he was because I'm in Australia. I'm not exposed to that side of things, you know, and I remember just seeing Armenia, and I'm like, yes, you know, like I get to fight a fellow brethren of mine, you know. And I had watched him fight a couple times leading up to in the quarterfinals and stuff, and I was just like, this guy that's some sick technique, you know, like he's super quick. But we had actually, in the draw, Shihan Cameron and I were pretty sure that I was actually going to fight the Japanese fighter, the guy that actually ended up going on and winning our division. And so we had already been like, I was focusing on that, which I think helped even more because it took away the focus from Artur. I was just like, oh, I'm not, you know, that's another problem. Deal with that another time. But it ended up that we fought each other. And I think with someone like him, very similar to myself, and without trying to like, oh, it's so great. But when you meet that sort of caliber of fighter, not knowing anything about each other, and it just gets brought out more and more in the fight, it just makes for an amazing match. And each person we just bounced off everything that was happening. Everyone that still talks to me, you might even be able to talk to Wesley about it. Everyone came up and they were like, that was a fight of the tournament. The 2-day tournament, all across all the weight divisions. Those 3 rounds that you guys fought was the best 3 rounds, technically, through the whole thing. And I was like in awe because I had no idea. I was just like, just fight this guy and just bring out the best. And that's what he did. He brought out the best of me. And I feel like I was doing the same with him, because I look back and I watch that fight probably once a week and just look at all the opportunities that he had to like knock me out, and I wasn't going down and all this sort of stuff, and kept coming forward, and his technique was blindingly fast, and he was hitting me with things that I'm like watching the video back and I'm going, hang on, slow that right down, and let's see how he's done that. And I'm thinking to myself, how can someone physically move like that? And he was just a beautiful, beautiful technician. And I remember at the end of it, just thinking to myself, that's a once in a lifetime experience in tournament fighting. You know what I mean? So, pardon me, I'm going to sneeze real quick.
It's okay. Don't worry. You can.
Oh, it's going to sneeze. Edit it out. Oh, it almost came out, but I beat it.
It's always like that. The worst is too is like when like if there's like a meme on the internet where it's like, by the way, just gotta sneeze. It's that meme where it's like people go achoo, achoo. The dad sneezes and like the whole house explodes. I don't know why. Like when like that like dudes hit like we're gonna hit a middle age. I don't know why our sneezes like it's so like the sneeze is like the atomic bomb. Like it's
it's funny, but yeah. Back to the. I think that was the most amazing thing about it was neither of us knew each other.
Mm-hmm.
Neither of us knew the background of each other. All we knew was he's Armenian and I'm an Armenian from Australia. And every time, like I was smiling in the middle of the ring. I was so happy, you know. Mm-hmm. I just remember looking at him and literally just big smile, just thinking, this is I will never get to fight someone like this ever again, without a doubt, you know. And I think like, because we talk every now and again and have back and forths about it and have a bit of a chuckle and whatnot. And, you know, and I think because he's such a humble guy as well, it makes it so much better to have been able to compete against him and like, losing to someone like that is not a bad thing to me at all. Mm-hmm. Like losing in general is not a bad thing, but when you lose to someone of that caliber over 3 rounds, so we went extension, we went to the weight, there wasn't any real weight between us. So we went in the final round. And in the final round, I remember it was almost midway through the round. He had just out of nowhere, he would have been probably right up in my face. And he threw this flush head kick. I didn't see it at all. You even see me in the middle of the thing, just go bang like that. And I'm just going, where did that? And then he followed it up again. And I just caught the second kick. And then he's gone to throw a big spin kick off me, catching his kick. And I ducked under. And I think that was kind of the turning point of the third and final round, because I just remember for the rest of my trip in Japan, just feeling like bruised up the side of my head. But the thing I take away from that is I didn't get wazaried and I didn't get knocked out. I just kept going forward. And I think that's kind of what he was enjoying the most about it, was I just kept moving, going forward. And I really genuinely feel like, I don't know. It was such a good experience. And then afterwards I was like, please, let's keep in contact. Let's get some photos. And we were just trying to have that really poor broken English conversation there, and at the end of it and stuff. And he was just like, anytime, you know, you come back home, come back home. And I'm like, man, if I'm ever over in that part of the world, that's the first place I'm gonna go back to. And yeah, Arthur's just watching him fight is pure poetry in my opinion. It's just so well thought out. His fight IQ is beautiful, and he just flows so well.
He's definitely up there. I mean, it's really a show watching him. We are seeing it's really the way he just demonstrates his movement. And he's really done a good job too of branding himself, putting the TikToks on there, really showing his knockouts. He's getting his following up, and we've communicated, him and I, and definitely he will come on the show soon. Just, right now it's very busy with stuff and world affairs too. Everyone, I don't want people being like, why is he on? And it's like, he's a karate fighter, but he's a great sensei and a devoted father. Like, I just want to say, like, I look at his Instagram, that man, like, if you're a dude that's single and you're trying to make your life better and you're looking for a good influence, look at Sensei Arthur. That man is just killing it at life.
He's got a real good balance. He's clearly brought up in a way that and I would like to say that, like, I'd like to think that karate's helped influence that part of his life to be that sort of a humble, down to earth. I mean, guys like him, with his ability and his technique, can go so the opposite direction. You know what I mean? Like, they can become bullies in the dojo. They can become real, lack of a better word, dicks. Like, they just, they can become so full of their own Kool-Aid that they just are not nice people in any way, shape, or form. But he is just such a nice human being, and even like you said, looking at his Instagram and whatnot, a lot of it is just to do with life in general and how happy he is and how he just wants to make others happy around him. And you can see that from just the energy he projects in what he does.
Mm-hmm. Very true. He's one of the real, like, look, there's many amazing Kyokushin guys. Like, he's one of my favorite ones to watch on social media are among him. Like, this is my list in no particular order. So there's him. There's Sensei Iwaton Teixeira, because now Iwaton's becoming, he's using YouTube to, like, give his knowledge on experience, which I think is amazing. So Iwaton, from what he did accomplished in the tatami, but also now what he's doing outside is amazing. And such a gentleman too, like Sensei Arthur. Andre, it's Andre and Sensei's Andre and the Lasha of God Hand in Russia, because of what they're doing with One Kyokushin and Martial Way in terms of just getting their content out there to show how to really market your dojo. Always Andrews Nakahara. He's my favorite fighter. And I'd say, that's who it is for me. There's many others. It's Sam Greco too, because Sam Greco just is like slamming Sam.
Slam and Sam.
Yeah, he's an interesting one though, because the story goes apparently that when he was with because remember back in the day, like, Sosai didn't want anyone going to K1. So apparently Sam was like, yeah, I'm down with Kyokushin. Apparently he's like, I'm down, I'm staying with you. The next day, he goes to K1. Listen, if I was in his shoes and they gave me that big 6-figure contract to fight in Japan, I'm taking it. Okay. I want to make that money now so I could be financially free. So I don't blame him.
Well, story goes that he did ask before he did, and I mean, he'll probably say something. I'm paraphrasing the story that I understand. And in the end, him and Sosai had a conversation about it, and they parted ways in a very mutual way. It wasn't like he just pissed off and was like,
no, for sure. Like, I want to make that clear. Yeah, I know that for a fact too, that based on what I know, he did approach Sosai and he's like, listen, my mind's here right now. And I'm paraphrasing to it from what I understand. And he said, I need to do this because this is like for me. And Sosai said, no problem. So
You got people like, like Mike Thompson jumps in there, and you have Andy Hoog and all these other great Kyokushin guys at that time. And they were all big guys too, all the big heavyweight fellas. I think it was just them saying, I've reached this point. There's not much more of a window competitively for me. So what's the next best thing that I can do? And in my opinion, had they not done that, then combat sport in general would be a very different landscape to what it is now.
I definitely agree.
100%. K1 set the benchmark for combat sport on a professional level, because yes, there was Muay Thai. Muay Thai's been around for forever, but it was never hyper exposed outside of Thailand in that way. It was very cultish, you know what I mean? It was very like almost like bodybuilding in this 70s, 80s, 90s. It was very like All those guys are just mental. What are they doing? You know, and people that knew Muay Thai knew it because they were a part of it. You know, then K1 came, and K1 just gave this hyper exposure through Japan and the world that were from the nations that were competing in it, which then set the benchmark for Pride, etc., etc., etc. So you gotta, as much as a lot of old Kyokushin OGs were turning, Sorsai was very against professional fighting because it's not about the money, etc. Yes, but at the same time, we have to thank those guys that were willing to take the risk, so to speak, and stick their necks out a little bit, because if it wasn't for them, professional combat sports would be a very, very, very different looking landscape today.
You think in the early days of the UFC, like the real Wild West days when it first came up, I believe that some of those K1 guys like Sam, Andy, maybe Mike Thompson, they could have stood with some of those early UFC tournaments.
Oh yeah, heck yes. And you could look at, I think the thing that was, Pat Smith fought in it, and he fought in K1. He fought Andy Cook, but he was probably the highest caliber striker, professional striker that went into it, and he did okay. But even he realized that he needed to have a little bit of wrestling and stuff like that as well. But yeah, I think if you say they came against like the likes of someone similar to them back in the Wild Wild West days, yeah, I think it would have been a very different outcome. But they were. It's interesting because you look at Mark Hunt, for example, who was in K1 and then transitioned over into Pride a couple times. You know, he didn't fare too bad, but he didn't do so well when it came to being taken out onto the ground. You know, so. Yeah, I think the Wild Wild West days would have been a fun time to watch good K1 fight. K1 fights, you know.
The 90s were just that last decade that you could do anything and we're just going to do it. It was basically saying, we're going to take this pie and we're going to throw it at a wall, and whatever mess happens, we're going to say we did it. That's the 90s in a nutshell. That's how I describe the 90s. It was just making a mess on the walls and seeing what would stick for the future.
Heck yeah. And it's funny because like, you had Gerard Gordeau who
the first fight.
Yeah. The first fight, the first UFC. He also fought in Vale Tudo, Japan. He didn't do amazingly, but he was a Savate fighter as well as a Kyokushin fighter. So he did head punches and that and the Savate stuff. But not at the same caliber as like, as your Sam Grecos and stuff like that were fighting in K1.
But he came out as a Savate fighter, not a Kyokushin fighter, because rumor has it, apparently that was when he left Kyokushin with his brother, and they left on kind of, because they're kind of, the Gordeaux, the Gerard is kind of seen as in light, and, as much as we should admire him for what he did for help put Kyokushin on the map in the first UFC, because years later he said, I came in as a Kyokushin fighter, but I came in as a Savate. And from what I understand, it was Savate because he left Kyokushin on not the best of terms after the 87 tournament. So he's always been kind of seen as the outlaw of Kyokushin.
Yeah, it's interesting. And kind of didn't really help that his reputation kind of went a little bit that way too after he competed in a few MMA matches, especially after what he did in Vale Tudo, Japan against far out the Japanese fighter. Essentially blinded him for life.
Yeah. No, he did. He was known as an eye poker. He fought. He also bit he was biting Hoist.
He bit Hoist's arm, his leg or something like that, or his arm. It's crazy.
Yeah,
survival.
He's like I'm not a sportsman, I'm a fighter. That was his argument.
That's hard to argue though. That is a bit. Yeah, interesting.
And he was nuts, man. So taking it aside from karate and Kyokushin, obviously, we also have a mutual interest in Pokemon. I've been playing Pokemon again. And can we say also that Pokemon can be, it can also, there's tenets of martial arts in Pokemon, because the battles, there's like your Pokemon's like your fighter, and then you're trying to tell it what move to do, like a Migi get, like a Mawashi Gary, and you're like the cornerman or the sensei or the trainer telling the Pokemon what to do.
I am one of those people that can relate fighting back to anything, whether it be business, that work, Pokemon. Pokemon's actually a really interesting one, because I look at certain techniques in karate, in Kyokushin in particular, similarly to some of the techniques in Pokemon fighting game, the Pokemon game, in the sense that, say for example, you get those really big one-shot KO moves in Pokemon, especially in the earlier days. But you've only got like five move points to do it. So you can only use it 5 times in a game. And if it misses completely, right? There's no damage, there's no nothing, whatever. I kind of look at some of the techniques that we do, like the jumping Dormashi-getis and the spinning back kicks, up in the air where we fall down, all that sort of stuff. I like to relate those back to those Pokemon moves, because you can only use them once, maybe twice in a fight before it starts to take away too much energy. But if you do land it, it's like a one-hit KO. But the problem is the percentage of landing it is also only like a 10% chance of landing it the whole fight. And I kind of look at it and laugh, and I say I'm a Pokemon, because I can only do a certain move a certain amount of times, and it's only going to have a certain percentage hit rate. So I've got to use it really, really smartly and really wisely. But yes, I love Pokemon.
Me too. The game, like for me, like I remember I used to choose the water starter. So I used to choose like Squirtle, then Totodile. And I beat Gold and Silver with Feraligatr using Ice Punch on just everything. The minute you taught that your starter Ice Punch, it's game over. It's like I was just like, okay. Because the Elite Four and Gold and Silver were a joke. But then I realized that Gold and Silver had the Kanto region that you had to complete, and then you had to fight Ash. Yeah, it's like the extension, like in a Kumite tournament. You're like, oh, it's great. I got to fight these new gym leaders now, and it's like the Kanto gym leaders like powered up, and then the final trainer. Spoiler alert for those who haven't played it, but everyone probably has that will listen to this. Fight Red, who's Ash, and it's like that's like the ultimate. It's like fighting. It's like the 100-man tournament, and you're fighting the ultimate. And you're just like, oh man, I'm done. Like I am done.
It's so good, eh? It's just like the newer games don't have the same feel. Like, sure, they look better and all that sort of stuff, but they definitely do not have the same feel of, I guess, like, because a lot of people our age that play the games, we don't have that connection with the TV series anymore either. So it's kind of like it's not that connect. But when you were a kid and you're playing Red and Blue and you were watching the TV show, you were just like, oh my God, this is my chance to be in the TV show. Like, this is my chance to be better than Ash and all that sort of stuff and blah, blah, blah. And then it's even funnier when you learn later on in life that Pokemon is actually a lot more violent than you ever gave it credit for. Because in the earlier days when it was a manga and all that sort of stuff, your Ice Punch, if that froze a Pokemon and your Pokemon then went and hit the frozen Pokemon, it would shatter that Pokemon. It was dead. So they had to adjust the TV series to make it a little bit more, like kiddie friendly. They can't have like a Dragon Ball style beam flying through a little fluffy animal.
And there's 2 episodes that never aired in to anywhere. It's only in Japan. It's the Porygon episode, because apparently it caused seizures, if you heard. Yeah. And the Safari Zone. There's 2 Safari Zone episodes. Remember the one with the Kangaskhan but there's another one that's only in Japan. And the reason
we got the Kangaskhan one when I was a little kid, we got the Kangaskhan one.
Same here. But we didn't get the Dratini Dragonair one, because that one, you know why? Because the Warden had a gun. And that was, and they didn't want to promote gun violence. Apparently, it's like some dumb reason, but it was a better episode. I'm telling you, it was like they got that. That was the one time they got the video game right with the show.
How about have you ever watched the YouTube series that they released on the Pokemon official Pokemon YouTube channel? What's it? And it's actually Red's journey.
Yeah, I've watched clips of it.
There's moments in that they try to make it as legit as possible to the actual manga back in the day. And I reckon that's way better than anything we used to watch on TV when we were kids.
Oh, it's just they're still continuing the series to this day. It's like how many times do you have to like blast off Team Rocket? How many times like can you keep Ash? Like, do we get a new character? I mean,
apparently they're going to retire Ash.
What?
I read that there is I think they are looking at finally retiring Ash Ketchum.
Good.
With the new character altogether. Yeah. Don't hold me to it. It's not.
It's alleged. Allegedly.
That's the
allegedly.
Word,
you know who I liked? I love the K because you know like how in Red you play as like Ash or Red. I loved Gold and Silver's character that you had because he had like the yellow baseball cap, the red hoodie.
Yeah.
I loved it. That was my favorite aesthetic look. He looked boss, and he had like that Pokey watch to like with the cell phone. Just get the most annoying thing is when you got that call, like, and only real Pokemon video game players remember this. You get a call from that youngster Joey. Hey, my Rattata grew to a level 31 Raticate. Come meet me at Route 26 and we'll battle it out every time. And it's like, no, like
just like, well, how's your Raticate going, bro? Not very good.
Every time you battle it, it's the same result. And he's like, oh, I gotta train it harder. And then you get like one of those like hikers that keep calling you. That's like, hey, my Geo dude is at level 40 now. You want to? No, I got 3 golems, and it's like, and the best part was it's like, because I used to call my character Taylor because they used to give you the list of names. So, yeah. So I called my Taylor. It's like Taylor sent 500 $Poké to mom. It's
I liked I used to play Yellow a lot, and I got the Nintendo 64 limited edition Pokemon Stadium pack. So it was a Pokemon Stadium setup, Nintendo 64, and it came with an expander pack on the back. So you could connect it to the controller, you put your Pokemon Yellow in, and you could play it on TV.
Oh, wow.
In like really shitty color, but you could play it on the TV. And so I'd sit there and I'd be playing. And then the Pokemon that you had in Yellow, you could then transfer into Pokemon Stadium and use them to battle out Pokemon Stadium, the OG Pokemon Stadium.
Right. That's awesome.
That was some gang stuff. That was some gang stuff because even in Pokemon Stadium, you used to be able to battle out the Elite Four and trainers. Like there was, again, an expansion part of it, the original, once you finished everything in the base game, and then all of a sudden this whole new thing just opens up for you. And I was just like, remember just being this kid, and I was screaming in excitement. I was probably like 13, but we'll say I was a kid.
Okay, it was those games are fun, like especially when you like make it to the Elite Four and whatnot. And then like they made like those were the days, man. Like today's kids will never understand what it was like to buy video games or get on a Game Boy Color. The kids get an iPhone. Like kids get an iPhone at like 7. For us, that was a Game Boy Advance or a Game Boy Color, or a Game Boy Advance SP or a PlayStation 2. They don't know what it's like. They don't remember those days before online games where you could just play the story.
How about having to go to the video store, hire the game? You only had it for 24 hours if you were lucky, and you had to get as far through the game as possible in that 24 hours of having it because your mum and dad were just like, we're not paying another $9 for this game for another day. Plus late fee.
Yeah. Oh, the best was for me. There's a video store that's by my where I live now. Well, it used to be, doesn't exist anymore. But this is back in the day when you had to rent stuff, and I always wanted to rent GoldenEye 64, and I could rent it during the week, but somehow that same greedy renter would come on the weekend and just take it, and I'd be like, well, looks like I'm renting Bomberman 64 for this weekend.
Oh, no. Bomberman 64 was horrible, but GoldenEye, I was fortunate that I had my own copy of GoldenEye.
Oh, yeah.
So, and then I had all the cheat codes to it too. So it was just, we had big head mode and stuff like that, and golden gun mode. And yeah, kids today will never understand. They will never understand. And I say it in like a nostalgic way more than trying to be like, oh, you kids today you'll never understand. But like it's stuff that you will hold on to forever. Like just that thought of having to, exactly like you said, like you could only get that video game on the weekdays because during the weekend it was such a popular game that there was no way in hell that you'd be able to play it and stuff like that if you had to like borrow it or whatever. But and if you did want to play multiple players, there was no going online and just randomly, playing against people. You had to like get your mates to come around. And you'd all be sitting there just, and like the screens are like this big on, because you were playing on, if you were lucky, a 42-inch screen, which was, the old tube TVs. It was just like horrible, kind of like Mario Kart on 64 as well. You play multiple player mode, and it's just like everybody's on a little square, and you're trying to work out where everyone is.
The worst way also too, like we had just the best, like on Saturdays, like it was like I don't know, we had like we have our channel called YTV, so they used to have like anime on Saturday mornings and then on Friday nights too. The worst was when I had to start missing it because like I had to take Hebrew school because like I had to get my bar mitzvah because like my mom said I'm just. It was the worst experience ever. Like my mom would be like, "Hey, you have to wake up at 6 a.m. You're not gonna watch your cartoons today." I'm like, why? Because you have to go to Hebrew school. So I don't want to go to Hebrew school. So for 6 months, I missed out on all the best animes. I missed out on Knights of the Zodiac, Dragon Ball Z, probably Yu-Gi-Oh back then, because this is like circa 2002, 2003. So and I was very angry for like those 6 months because I did not want to do this, but I had to. But
I used to get my mom to video record because they would play Dragon Ball Z when I had to start getting on my bike and riding to school. So I'd catch the first 5 to 10 minutes of the episode, and then I'd get my mum to record the rest of the episode to the point where she started knowing the characters and the storylines.
God.
And I was just like, I'd ride home really quick, and I'm like, quickly put it in, and she's like, don't worry, you didn't miss much. It was just this and this. I'm like, Mom, what are you doing? You're ruining it.
It's like a filler episode, but she's probably like, oh man, those are the days, man. Like it's like for me, it was like my animes of choice were Dragon Ball, Pokemon, Gundam Wing, especially. People never understood my obsession with Gundam Wing. Like I remember my dad was like, he's like, why the hell do you have obsession with these giant robots for? It's like, pick a sport. Why are you obsessed with it? Why do you want these toys? What is like? He's like, do you know how stupid this is at 9 years old? Do you think 9-year-olds play with this? And I'm like, Dad, it's just, you don't understand. Like, and then that's that. I think when I was obsessed with anime, that's when my parents should have got the sign and said, okay, we're putting him in martial arts, because they tried team sports, and every time I went to you guys have the Y Community Center in Australia,
YMCA's and stuff like that.
YMCA, yeah. So they put me at the YMCA. It was called Ultimate Kids to get me to play sports. Every time the person, Andrew will play for 5 minutes and then he doesn't want to play at all. He'll just sit down and say his back is hurting. And then they're like, so if that, looking back, that should have been a sign that we need to put we need to put Drew in martial arts. He's not participating in team sports. It's not for him. Like, and that's the thing too. Like, I mean, obviously, everyone wants to put all. Listen, I'm gonna say this to as for those who are young parents, this is a PSA to all the young parents. Don't screw up with putting your kids in a sport they hate. So they hate you, and then they do mischievous stuff. Try them in martial arts. Pick a style of anything. We prefer Kyokushin Karate because this show is a Kyokushin-based show. But if you put them in wrestling or BJJ, so be it, because sometimes we can't play with others, okay? Listen, I'm on the autism spectrum. I cannot do team sports with people. I don't know why, but I do better with martial arts because it's an individual sport. And yes, there's a team component too with the tournaments, but I don't do well. So listen, take it from me. If you're a parent that watches this show and you're thinking of putting your kid in martial arts, please hear the story that I had, that Ben had about team sports, and just do yourself and your kid a favor and put them in martial arts. They'll thank you later on in life.
Heck yeah, man. And don't put them in and with this grand expectation. Just let them have fun. Let them enjoy it. I always say I wouldn't be where I am with martial arts if it wasn't for my mum and dad. Not because they pushed me into it, because like I said, I asked if I could do it, but because every class, every seminar, every camp, every tournament, everything, they were like 100% on board as if I was going to become the next great football rugby star of Australia. Like they didn't care. They just invested so much time and effort into making sure that I got to everything, no matter what, right? Like, and I think it's not a daycare. If your kid doesn't like it, pull them out because they'll never come back to it later on. If they enjoyed it, but they had to stop for whatever reason, they'll come back eventually. But if they join because you push them into it, like a team sport, they'll never go back. It's just horrible. And yes, not all kids that play well with others want to play well with others. We sometimes want to choke someone out or kick them in the face, you know, like let us do that.
I'm pretty sure 9-year-old me looking back when I looked at some of the kids that had to play basketball with at that YMCA, like I'm pretty sure I was thinking, man, I would just love to I would just love to punch you in the face right now. And I could go back home and watch Digimon on Fox Kids. Cause that's what I'm missing out right now. Well, I have to listen to your stupidities of why you think basketball is better and why you're bullying me that I suck at basketball. I could be at home watching Digimon, but no, you had to rub it in my face that I suck at basketball. And yes, I do suck at basketball because I'm not a team sport kind of guy. Okay. So yeah.
I was horrible at basketball, but I was good at rugby. I was really good at rugby. And the only problem was when I got to a certain age, I stopped growing and all the other kids kept growing. So I couldn't keep up in terms of the, you know, getting run down.
Makes sense.
Like, I'm just going to fight people instead.
It's better. There's something about fighting. You just like get your anger out. You have a bad day at work. Just go to the dojo, take it out on the pads or the bag, and maybe some light sparring.
I said, or on a white belt. Well, I'm just kidding.
No, we're joking. We're joking. That's a bad joke. No. But it's listen, it's just what it is. So then the last question before we go, two quite last questions. So the second to last question is favorite fighters to watch currently in MMA. So this is something I'm going to start doing more. It could be any. It could be any. It could be more than one.
Oh, okay. At this present point in time, to watch, not I'm like, you know, fanboy or anything like that, but in terms of favorite fighters to watch, Valentina Shevchenko.
Okay.
I really, really, really enjoy watching Islam Makhachev. I just want to see where he's going to go. Is he the next coming, so to speak? I love watching Israel Adesanya. He really has made strikers look good again. You know, not going to sit here and say, you know, comparisons to Anderson Silva or anything. No. But I'm also very, very aware that he is very, very good at striking and he's very free. So it makes him, you know, people are going to make that comparison. Who else have I really, whenever I see them on a card, I'm like, I really want to watch that.
Mousasi?
If you don't watch a Mousasi fight, you're missing out. Gegard is a beast. He's probably one of the most underrated MMA fighters to ever go into the UFC to start off. Well, not to start off with, but was underrated going into the UFC, in my opinion. They didn't give him enough. And then when he walked away from it, it's just kind of like, sure, he still fights Bellator as champion and all that sort of stuff, but I still feel like he's way better than what people give him credit for in Bellator. I really, really, really enjoy watching the one cards. I know that's not UFC and I know it's a whole different thing, but the one card that's coming up this weekend, have you seen that lineup?
I don't really follow one, as embarrassing as it sounds, because it's in Asia. Yeah. But I know one is doing a lot of great things. Like that's something I am aware of.
Dude, some of the fighters on one are insane. Like you got Rod Tang, he's fighting Demetrius Johnson in a crossover fight. So he's doing 2 rounds MMA, 2 rounds Muay Thai. Dude, that's gonna be sick. You know, so and then there's Stam Fairtex, she's fighting as well. She's fighting, I think, Angela Lee. Yeah, I think that's like for a double champ thing or something like that. But those fighters are just insane to watch. So yeah, that at the moment, whenever I see them on a card, I'm just like, must watch. If I do not watch it, I am very upset.
Makes sense. I'm the same way. We kind of have the same list of fighters. Like for me, it's more or less the same. So yeah, except for Islam, because I mean, no respect, no disrespect, but I like Hamzat more. Hamzat's really one.
That's scary. Oh, I can't wait to watch him fight again. I want to see something happen. I want to see
violence, and I want to see how good he really is versus Burns.
Yeah, heck yeah.
Yeah. That's my goal. And the other question is, last question is, so a lot of people, I'm a James Bond fan. It's like, for everyone who knows, like I post it in my story every time, like there's something cool about James Bond or Star Wars.
Star Wars.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay. I love James Bond. Dad and I used to watch him every Saturday. They put him on TV for like months at a time. Dad and I would sit down and watch him. But I'm a massive Star Wars fan. You know, and the reason why I'm a massive Star Wars fan is because to me, it has a very strong martial arts, sort of samurai, Budo, Bushido element to it, which is actually where George Lucas got the whole idea for the Jedi. And I'm just like totally obsessed with it in that way. So yeah, huge fanboy, Star Wars fanboy. Sorry, cool. James.
Don't worry. No. It's okay. I'm more of a James Bond guy. Like I could tell you what the Star Wars movies are. I can't tell you what happened in every one of them, like some can, but I can tell you what happened in this James Bond film or that James Bond film. But I can't remember what I spent money on the day before, but I can remember every James Bond film. So
it sounds like me.
Yeah, it's more common than you think. Ben, thank you so much for doing this, man. I had such a blast doing this. Like, I really hope like you had a fun time. Where can people connect with you?
You can find me either on Facebook, Ben Ajamian, Ajamian, or you can find me at punisherf.i.t. That's f.i.t. punisherf.i.t. And that's my Instagram tag. So you can find me there. DM me, tag me in on anything. I'm more than happy to chat. And anytime people want to come to Australia and want to train, you can find me at the Quintessential Combat Centre or QCC. We're in the middle of relocation, but that'll be all sorted out really soon. So when the world is opened up and it's a better place to travel around in, everyone's welcome. Doors always open.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for coming on. It was a huge honor. Like you could tell how excited I was. Like it's like I brought that energy, man. That's what it is. When you love what you do and you make the guests feel valued, the episode is just gonna flow better.
Heck yeah. And I really appreciate the invite and connecting, and it was good fun. I love that. I love that energy. That's what I'm all about. Everyone that knows me knows, hands down, energy is all I'm about. So big us and a big thanks.
No problem. Guys, make sure to like, share, subscribe, share the conversation. If you like this conversation, make sure to share the page of Drew Experience. We're growing 80% combat sports, 20% everything else. Us.